Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. As I'm filming this, I'm seeing the first snowflakes of the year. Kind of depressing, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. Even though I live in Wisconsin, I do not appreciate the snowfall. Yes, there's times it looks beautiful. Yes, there's times I like having a little bit of snow. But in the fall, it's always kind of depressing because it's generally starts signaling the end of the open water fishing for me. I expect our lakes to start to lock up here probably in the next week. Um, and right now, they're saying we might get up to 3 inches of snow. Definitely not looking forward to this. I probably should be happy, to be honest with you, because a lot of times we get our first snowfall in October. And right now, it's the end of November. So, from that standpoint, I probably shouldn't complain too much. Still kind of depressing. I will say this though, it does make me think about fishing jerk baits. Jerk bait is one of the best cold water baits that we have, not just for bass. All game fish species seem to love a jerk bait. And it's one of my favorite baits to throw during the winter time. Now, having said that, there are some things that I see some individuals do that I think are costing them some fish when they're fishing with a jerkbait. I think it might be limiting the number of bites that they're getting, and it might be preventing that bait from being a much more versatile tool and technique for them when they go out fishing. So I've got for you some mistakes that I see anglers make that I think if you can adjust, or if you're an angler that makes these mistakes, just give it a try. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm saying these are things that I don't think are helping your jerkbait fishing. Now, before I share these with you, I do want to point out that I have a members only channel. And if you're looking for more content from me, we provide additional monthly videos, a monthly live stream. You can have direct access to me. If those are things that interest you, check out my members only channel by going to my YouTube homepage, click the join button. You can see all the additional information there. I also want to point out that I do have an affiliate deal with Tackle Warehouse. So if you're looking at purchasing some tackle for yourself or maybe some loved ones during the holiday season here, it would mean a lot to me if you use the Tackle Warehouse affiliate link that's in my video description. You can bookmark it for future use as well. The little bit of money I make from that comes right back into making content for the channel, like the Master Angler Award challenge that I just did. So hopefully, guys, you use that link and it supports the channel and it's a win-win for everybody. So thank you very much for those of you who are using that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about jerk baits. You know, a jerkbait is just a phenomenal bait at generating strikes from fish that are usually more in a lethargic mode. The erratic darting motion, the ability to suspend in the water column or slowly, float or sink is something that can just really entice fish into biting. Now, having said that, there are some things that you can do that, in my opinion, are preventing you from catching fish with a jerkbait. Now, this is the Berkeley Stunna Shad Fillet Color, one of my favorite jerkbaits out there. And I got to tell you guys, it's funny. Every time I mention the Berkeley Stunna, I get a lot of guys that reach out and they say it's a sponsor plug. It's really not a sponsor plug. This is one of my go-to jerkbaits. Now, having said that, I throw various brands of jerkbaits. And the reason for that is simple. It's because generally speaking, anglers out there only want a jerkbait that suspends perfectly in the water column. There is something to say that a suspending jerkbait can be really good, but one of the mistakes I see anglers make is not utilizing a slow sinking jerkbait like the Berkeley Stunna or a slow floating jerkbait. There are definitely times and places. If you're fishing a lake where the fish are down deeper, you can't get them to come up to your bait, and you got to get your bait deeper to the fish, a slow sinking jerkbait like the Stunna is phenomenal. Now, at the same time, if you're looking for a jerk bait where you're fishing shallow water, maybe making some bottom contact and you want your bait to slowly float off the bottom, going with a floating jerk bait or a high rise jerk bait like the Silent Riser from Megabass, which I'm not sure if they even make that anymore. But the point is, if you're crashing into the bottom, you want your bait to float up off the bottom, and that generates strikes, just like you generate more strikes by a sinking jerk bait to get it down to the fish. So for anglers out there that are solely looking for something that floats or suspends at the, every time out, that's not necessarily always the best thing. Sure, there's times you definitely want a suspender, but there's also times you want one that rises and sinks a little bit. So that is one mistake that I see anglers making. A second mistake is that anglers really only like to throw jerk baits during the cold water periods. It is definitely not a cold water bait only. Absolutely one of the best cold water baits on the market. If you could give me 5 baits to throw when the water temp is 50 degrees or less, this is definitely going to be a choice of mine. And there's a reason for that. That's where it excels. But it's also a great year-round bait. You can catch them in 100-degree water with it. I mean, the reality is generally all the angler has to do is change their retrieve speed. In really warm water, I'm probably fishing it a lot faster. In cold water, I'm giving it a lot longer pauses in a lot of instances. But the point here is you got to have something that uh, you got to have one tied on almost year round, and it really is good for all the species. In fact, if you're a northern smallmouth angler, you probably do generally have it tied on almost year round. But for some reason, for largemouth and spotted bass, it seems like it goes away more in the cold water period. So don't sleep on it as just a cold water bait. Now, another thing that I see a lot of anglers, in my opinion, make an error with is their rod selection with their jerk baits. Generally speaking, a lot of anglers like to go with a little bit longer rod because that longer rod gives them better casting distance. Well, I'm here to tell you, I think that's a mistake. I really think you want to go with a little bit shorter rod. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You know, the days of fishing with, say, an old Rattling Rogue that was a tough bait to cast and you wanted a longer rod to cast it further are kind of gone. You know, the weight transfer systems in baits like the Stunna and the 110 and most good jerk baits on the market now, there's usually a tungsten bead or a tungsten ball in there. You can kind of see this one falling back and forth. You know, that's so critical to casting long distances that it actually trumps the length of the rod, and you don't necessarily need a real long rod now. For me, that long rod means you're moving the bait further. So I generally like to throw a 6.6 or 6.9, you know, a shorter rod, because when I go to snap it, instead of pulling the bait further, I'm really getting the bait to almost stay in place, but twitch around in that same area. If you go with a long rod, a 7.5 foot rod, you're moving that bait much faster than you think you are. So if you were to compare a 7.5 to a 6.5 foot rod, every time you snap that bait, you're getting a much different movement and you're pulling that bait much, much further with that 7.5 footer. So if I'm fishing in the cold water period, I'm generally going with a shorter rod. And a lot of anglers out there have kind of forgotten about rods that are less than, you know, say 7 foot long. It's just it's the natural instinct these days is to go with a longer rod. And then the last thing I just want to point out with this, where I hear a lot of people say you can't throw a jerk bait, is in dirty or off-colored water. And that is 100% wrong as well. I can't tell you how many days I've had catching tons and tons of fish on jerkbait in what most people would consider very, very dirty or muddy water. The reality is, a lot of those lakes, you know, where you have muddy water, the shad populations excel. They do very, very well. There's a lot of nutrients in the water. Shad just generally do well in very dirty water. Well, if you have a strong shad population, the game fish in that body of water are keying in on that bait fish as well. So a jerk bait is one of the best baits at imitating a bait fish. So the fish, you know, are feeding on those shad, even though the water is muddy or off colored or tannic stained. I mean, I've got a lot of really tannic stained bodies of water here in Wisconsin, down in Florida, where you're fishing in like coffee and it's clear, but it's really dark black water. And the fish love jerk baits in it. There's a lot of guys out there that would say a jerk bait is really meant for clear water fishing. But in my opinion, it's not just clear water, it's a muddy water bait as well. So those are just some tips, some different types of mistakes that I think some anglers might be making. You know, hopefully, if you're not making these mistakes, if you are making these mistakes, give these tips a try. Go out to your local lake, throw it in dirty water. You know, throw a sinking or floating jerk bait. Just mix in some of these different tips, and I think you might see that you generate a few extra bites each trip out. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.